Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the DM's Club, a show about RPGs brought to you by Titan Bear Gaming. My name is Alex Edwards, and in today's video we're going to be continuing our Beginner's Guide series with a video on how to magic as a D&D character. Now, the previous videos that we did for the Beginner's Guide was on what is D&D and how do you play, as well as making a character for D&D. And I mentioned in the video on making a character for D&D that if you're going to make a character that falls into the magic casting archetype, then what that means is that you cast magic spells, but like everything else in D&D, that has a system of rules that goes with it to provide you a little bit of structure for figuring out what kinds of magic you can do, how often you can do it, etc. Now, inside each of the class definitions, you'll find that the class table for magic characters has an extension to the table that includes how much magic and what kinds of magic you're able to cast. That's what we're going to be covering in today's video. This section can be a little bit confusing for new players first picking it up. Understanding the different spell levels and spell slots can be kind of weird terminology since there's not really anything else like this that exists outside of role-playing games. So the basic questions that you should be looking to answer as a new player picking up a magic class in D&D are as follows. What spells can you cast? How often can you do it? And what are the details that are associated with casting magic? Magic is a very powerful thing in a storytelling game. It lets you bend physics and manifest new things into the world that wouldn't otherwise have been there. And so there have to be some rules and some level of controls that go into it. Fortunately, it's all specified in the player's handbook. You just got to learn how it works. And it's not too complicated, really. Now, picking up the book can be a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of information that's present in here, and to be perfectly honest, the book doesn't exactly do a good job of making it clear what are the different styles and how does one work versus how another one works, and for the most part, the book just relies on you gaining experience yourself and talking to people that already know so that you can figure it out yourself. But hopefully this video will be a little bit of a leg up on that process so you can get a nice kickstart in figuring out how to use magic for your character. Now, I'm going to be speaking generally about how the different D&D classes that cast magic engage magic, how they use magic, what kinds of spells, etc. I'll be speaking generally, but when I get to each section, I will list which classes that particular style of magic applies to. So if you've got a class in mind, or maybe you're already playing that class and just want to have a better understanding of how it works, listen up to see if your class is on that list. So let's try to answer the first question. What spells can you cast? Now come with me to the back of the book. We're going to go to page 207, and we're going to look at what are called your class spell lists. Now, this one right here is the Bard spell list, and you'll see that all the different spells that exist in the game that your Bard can cast are divided up into a whole bunch of levels, starting with cantrips, which are also called 0-level spells, moving on to 1st level, 2nd level spells, all the way up to 9th level spells. Now, what does this mean? A 0-level spell is the least powerful spell in the game, least powerful spell rank in the game. These are things that, from story terms, are going to be things that magical apprentices can cast to practice and hone their craft. It's things that are fairly easy and doesn't really require too much in the way of mental capacity or preparation time or what else. These are easy spells to cast. Once you get up to 1st level spells and going all the way up to 9th level spells, you're now going to start reaching limitations on how many of these spells you're able to cast in a given day. But we'll worry about that in a second. For now, let's just pay attention to the fact that 1st level spells are the weaker spells in the game. These could be things like charming a person to make them think that you're their friend when you may not necessarily be their friend, or being able to cast a spell like Thunder Wave to shoot out a little bit of noise that can push objects and damage creatures in the area, all the way up to 9th level spells like Power Word Kill. You point at a creature and they die, or you're able to cast True Polymorph. You're able to take a creature and transform them into anything else that you can think of. You can transform that dragon into a rabbit. No big deal, right? Other classes get other amazing 9th level spells like creating a new plane of existence or wishing that time was altered such that, some bad thing that previously happened didn't actually happen after all, and we're just going to completely alter the time path of the world. That's the kind of thing you can do with a 9th level spell. Now, All the spells in the game are divided up into this cantrips and levels 1 through levels 9 spells. And so this is how you need to envision the kinds of spells that your character is able to cast over the course of the game. You'll start with level 1 spells and cantrips, and then as your character grows in character levels, you'll be able to access and cast higher level spells. Also in this section, right behind the spell lists, are all the different descriptions for the different spells that exist within the game. Now you can go take a look at them. You're going to have a whole bunch of details listed within each spell, which talks about which school of magic it is, what spell level you're looking at, casting time, right? We're going to talk about all of those at the last section for this video, so you can gloss over that a little bit, but I do recommend taking a look at some of the descriptions for the spells, just so you can get an idea of what kinds of things your character class can actually do. Now, it's a lot of information, there's a lot of spells here, and it'll take you time to go through it, but that's okay, you've got time. You only need to worry about level 1 spells to start with, or maybe level 2 spells to start with, so you can start small and build your way up. So your spell lists indicate the total possible range of all spells that are available to each class as they play over the course of the game. But that doesn't really answer the question, which spells can they cast now? Which spells can they cast at level 1? What about when you get to level 2, level 3, etc.? What can you do? So that comes down to which kind of spellcaster you are. And you're either going to be a known spells spellcaster, you're going to be a prepared spells spellcaster, or you're going to be a spellbook-oriented spellcaster. And each class is divided into each one. Fortunately, the spell book is the weird one, and that one's only got wizards, so if you're not playing a wizard, you don't have to worry about that one. Each of the other two, spells known and spells prepared, indicate which number of spells of your spell list you are able to cast. So let's get into that. In order to find this out, you're going to go to your class description section, and you're going to look at your class table. Now, this one right here is the Bard class table, and you notice there's a whole bunch of columns in here that are related to magic. Now, a Bard is a spells known oriented character. The other spells known characters are the Ranger, the Sorcerer, and the Warlock, as well as the Eldritch Knight archetype for the Fighter and the Arcane Trickster archetype for the Rogue, but don't sweat it. So right now we're dealing with spells known. Spells known is the easiest example. What spells known is on your column of spells known, at each level that you are of a bard, first level, second level, third level, etc., you have a number of spells that you know how to cast. And that's it. The English actually explains it really well. You know how to cast 4 spells at first level bard. At second level bard, you know how to cast 5 spells. At third level, you know how to cast 6 spells. And that's great. You're going to go to the back of the book and you're going to pick 4 spells that you know how to cast. And as you grow in levels, you'll be able to add a new spell every level in accordance with what's listed here in your spells known column of your class table. Now, which spells can you pick? It has to be a spell that you can cast. And what that means is you have to have slots available, and that's what these other columns indicate. Your spell slots per level are the number of times per day that you can cast a spell of that appropriate level. Don't worry, we'll go into more detail of what that means, but for now, know that if you have a number written there, it means that you can cast spells of that level, and if you have a hyphen there, it means that you can't cast spells of that level. In short, at first level, Bard, you can only cast first level spells. But as you grow in Bard levels, when you get to a third level Bard, you can unlock second level spells. And when you get to a fifth level Bard, you unlock third level spells. As your character grows, you unlock higher and higher power tiers, higher level spells that you can cast. So, in order to pick your spells known that your character can cast, you have to pick from the spell levels that you can cast at that current level. Now, prepared casters operate a little bit differently. Prepared casters don't use this concept of spells known. There are only 3 in the game, Cleric, Druid, and Paladin. They basically have access to all of the spells that are listed in their spell list in the back of the book. Now, they can only cast spells that they have spell slots for, so they're still beholden to the same style that a known caster is. Namely, at level 1, you can only cast first level spells, and as your character grows in levels, you'll be able to grow to second level spells and third level spells. But you don't have a limit in terms of the number of spells that you know. You know all of the spells that are listed in your class list. Instead, you operate with this concept called spells prepared. Now, how does this work? What this means is, in-game time, Every morning, your character wakes up and has a private meditation session with their god or their deity or nature or whoever, depending on the kind of character that you are, and prepares a finite number of spells that they're going to be able to use for the day. But every day, they could change that out into a different list. Now, the number that you're able to prepare is indicated in your class description. It's under your spellcasting area, and it's under the part that says preparing and casting spells. But it's loosely defined as class level plus the casting modifier that your class uses. It's okay. It's written down. You can look it up. Just know that on any given day of in-game time, you pick 4, 5, 6, 7 spells from your list that you are able to cast for the day. And this is known as preparing your spells. Then the next day of in-game time, after you go to sleep and your character rests up, the next morning when you're having your little powwow with your god or with nature, you can pick a different set of spells that you're going to prepare for the day. Now on to Spellbook. Spellbook is the weird one. Spellbook is the one that's kind of a mix of the two. Now, you still start with your class spell list, and the only class that operates with a spellbook is the Wizard. The Wizard has a spell list in the back of the book, but the Wizard doesn't just automatically get access to all those spells in the way that the known character has to select some from that list, or the prepared character automatically gets all of those. In fact, the spellbook character does not automatically get all of those. The spellbook character has to find those spells somewhere in the game as you're playing. Now, how this actually translates is a spellbook-oriented character has a spellbook object on their person that they populate with spells. They write spells down into their spellbook. Once they write the spell down into their spellbook, then they have the ability to cast from that spellbook. But they have to find the spell in the first place. Now, this can be done either by finding a scroll in the game and you copy it down from the scroll, or if you find somebody who's willing to teach you the spell, or if you find another spell book that you can copy it from a different spell book into your own. But wizards and anybody that uses a spell book has this kind of mini game that they play through that DMs have to provide for them, where they find spells in the world to add to their spell book. Now, once the magic spells are in their spell book, there's an additional level where the wizard then applies the same kind of concept as the prepared caster, where they then have to every morning look over their notes and refresh themselves on a small number of those spells. And just like the prepared caster, it's the number of spells that you can refresh yourself on any given day is equal to your character level plus your casting modifier. And that's cool. It's written down in the book. You can look that up. But the bottom line is, wizards and spellbook casters still have the same kind of prepared concept. They have to pick 5, 6, 7 of the spells that they have in their spell book that they ready for the day that they can then use for the day. So the 3 different kinds that we've got are spells known, spells prepared, and spell book. Spells known just picks a number of spells from their class list in the back, and they know those spells. So long as they have spell slots available to cast those spells, they know those spells from then on. Prepared casters effectively know all the spells listed in the back of the book under their class list, but they have to pick a number of them that they ask their god to let them cast for the day. So every day of in-game time, you prepare a small list of which ones you prepare for the day. The wizard, aka the spellbook caster, operates in kind of a different capacity. They have to find their magic spells in the game. They don't automatically get the spells that are in their spell list at the end, but they still have to prepare and refresh themselves on which spells they want to cast for a day, just like a regular prepared caster. So hopefully that makes sense. So now let's try to answer the question, how many times can you cast these magic spells per day? And we've already touched on it a little bit when we were talking about the spell slots concept. In essence, the number of times that you can cast a spell per day is equal to the number of spell slots that you have available for that level of spell. Now, let's look at the Bard casting table again. You'll see here that we've got, as your character goes from level 1 through 20, you've got spell slots per spell level. First level, second level, third level, fourth level, etc. A first level Bard has 2 level 1 spell slots. A second level Bard has 3 first level spell slots. And it's only once a Bard gets to third level that a Bard suddenly gets 4 first level spell slots as well as 2 second level spell slots. Second level spells now becomes available to the Bard, and you can cast 2 of them per day and 4 first level spells per day. That's how you read this table. If you were looking at a 5th level Bard, you could cast 4 level 1 spells per day, 3 level 2 spells per day and 2 third level spells per day. So your ability to cast high level magic builds pretty quickly as you're playing through your character. It's a pretty exciting thing. Now, to complicate things a little bit further, you can scale spells to a higher level by casting them at a higher level. What does this mean? What it's basically done for is to make it so that first level spells don't get left behind by the time that you have access to 5th level spells or 7th level spells or 9th level spells. Inside the spell descriptions, you'll see that a good number of these spells can be cast at a higher level. If it's a damaging spell, it usually means that the damage goes up. If it's a spell for putting monsters to sleep, then you'll be able to put more monsters to sleep or something along these lines. What this means is you can cast a first level spell at a higher level spell slot so long as you have the spell slot to do it. So let's say that we're dealing with our 5th level bard again, and you've got 4 first level spell slots, 3 second level spell slots, and 2 third level spell slots. But you want to cast a first level spell, magic missiles, at 3rd level. You can do so long as you haven't otherwise consumed your 3rd level spell slots. If you look at the magic missile spell card, it shows you that by leveling up the spell, casting it at a higher level, you get additional magic missiles, which means more damage is done. So you have that feature. And so as a magic caster, you've got to understand that your daily spell casting economy is dictated by these spell slots that you have access to. And again, it is defined by the number of spell slots that you get per day. These refresh after your character takes a long rest. So we've already talked about which spells you're able to cast. We've looked at your character's spell list. We've looked at the fact that all spells in the game are divided up into spell levels, ranging from 0 level spells, aka cantrips, to 1st level spells all the way up to 9th level spells. And that depending on the kind of character you're playing, you're either going to be a spells known character, where you only know a subset of those spells, or you're a prepared character, where you know all those spells, but you prepare a subset of them every day, having a conversation with your god every morning of in-game time. Or you're going to be a spell book character, which uses a combination of the two. You have to find those magic spells in the game, and then every day you review your spell list and pick a subset of those that you are then going to have refreshed or prepared for every day of in-game time. We've also talked about how many spells you're able to cast each day with the spell slots concept, that you can cast a number of spells per day equal to the number of spell slots for each spell level that you have available to you, and that you recover those spell slots every day. But not all magic is created equal. There's actually additional level of detail that comes down to each individual spell that your character may be interested in casting. Now, once we get to this level, once we're talking about each specific spell, there is a RPG accessory that is honestly the single best RPG accessory that I've ever come across for playing D&D, and it's these spellbook cards. These are an officially licensed product from Wizards of the Coast, the makers of Dungeons and Dragons, and they produce these cards that have on them each of the spells that exist in the game and all of their corresponding details. Now, we're going to go through and look at some of these cards and see how you read these. Like I said, I highly, highly recommend buying these and then buying yourself a binder sheet that you can put trading cards into so that you can have the spells that you've selected or you have the spells that you frequently use on hand so that you can, if you have to remind yourself, oh wait, how does that spell work? What is the details of this spell? You've got the spell directly in front of you. I really recommend these spell cards. So let's take a look at some of these. There's a whole bunch of additional details that are specific to each spell. You'll see at the top of this spell card that you've got the name and you've got the level of spell that it is, and then some details about it, as well as the bulk of the page is taken up by the description of what the spell does. That's part of why these spell cards are so great, is they remind you of what exactly the specific text of the spell is in front of at the gaming table. Now, let's go to each one of these things and talk about what each of these mean. The first one is casting time. Now, we haven't talked about it too much, but every character, every round of the game has an action, a bonus action, and a reaction. Think of these as 3 separate kinds of actions that your character gets to do in each round. Normally, when you're casting spells, it's probably going to be during combat. And so each round of combat, you have an action, a bonus action, and a reaction. Each of these spell cards is going to list for the particular spell what kind of action it's going to take in order to cast the spell. For the most part, it takes 1 action to cast a spell. Some spells can be cast quickly as a bonus action. Some spells can be cast even faster as a reaction in response to somebody else doing something. But it'll say on the card, or it'll say in the description of the player's handbook, what's the casting time needed for that particular spell. Some of them have a fancy casting time where they take an hour to cast, or they take 10 hours to cast, or something like that. So pay attention to that when you're looking at your spells. Next, we have range. Now, what range means is it's the distance from you to the target of how far away you're able to be to cast the spell. Now, usually this is specified by a maximum value. So if this is 120 feet, then you can be anywhere within 120 feet of your target to be able to cast the spell on them. You do need to have a line of sight, so you can't cast through a wall, even if you know the person is there. You do need to be able to see them. And even if you're trying to look through a window, you can't actually cast through a window for the most part. There are some special cases for this. Other times you will see range will say touch, which means that you need to be physically touching the person or object in order to cast the spell on them. Or you'll see the range as self, which means that you just cast it on yourself. You don't have to touch yourself in order to do it. You just cast it on yourself immediately. So that's the range component of a spell description. Now, components. Components has a little codified section, and it basically says either VS or M, or some combination thereof. And they each pertain to a different thing that comes down to the role play of how you are casting the spell in the game. So, V means that there is a verbal component to the spell. You need to be able to speak in order to cast the spell. So if you are bound and gagged, or if your mouth has been sewn shut by magic or by some kind of crazy doctor or something, you can't cast a spell that has a V listed under the components. S stands for somatic, which is a funky word for saying that you need to be able to do hand gestures in order to cast the spell, which means that if your hands are bound, or if your hands have something in them, or if your hands have been cut off, you can't cast a spell that has an S in the components. Remember, S means somatic. M means that there is a material component to the spell. Now, when you've been looking through your character creation sheet, you might have been seeing that some characters have a component pouch as one of your starting pieces of equipment, or an arcane focus, or something along these lines. And this pertains to the materials that may be a material cost for a spell. Some of the spells have mundane materials costs. They don't have any kind of gold cost associated with it, so it doesn't actually cost you any money, and it's mostly there for role-playing fluff. But it might be something like this one, which is you need to have a pinch of soot and a pinch of salt in order to cast the spell. This is just flavor text. This is just helping you to picture and visualize that if your character was going to have a spell component pouch around their neck or dangling from their belt, that they would take this pinch out and they would sprinkle it out in front of them while they were completing the casting of the spell. It's very rich and very vivid. Conversely, if you choose a arcane focus, or you have a divine focus coming from your character sheet and your character creation, you can use that in place of a materials requirement, so long as the spell doesn't say that the material has a gold cost associated with it. Some of the fancier spells, especially the resurrection spells, are going to have materials costs where it'll say the spell consumes a diamond worth 25 gold pieces during the course of casting. What that means is that you need to actually have a diamond worth 25 gold pieces on hand in order to cast the spell that it then consumes. So it costs 25 gold pieces to cast the spell. The next section for the spell description is duration. This should be fairly self-explanatory, though there's one fancy piece in this. Some of the spells are instant. Like if you're going to cast a fireball, then instantaneously a giant blast of fire is going to erupt in an area, and then the fire dissipates and it goes away. Other ones are going to be things like charming somebody. If you're going to cast a spell to turn someone into your friend for a little while, that may last 5 minutes, it may last an hour, it may last 10 hours, it may last 4 days. That's what the duration counter here is intending to explain and to clarify for how long does the spell last. Now, for the most part, spells that you cast last for however long it says on there, and you don't have to do anything else in order to upkeep the spell. But certain spells are going to have this symbol, the C, which stands for concentration, which means that this spell is a little bit harder to cast, and it means that you have to devote a part of your brain to maintain the concentration of that spell for its duration. Now, concentration adds an additional level of complexity to magic casters, and basically what it means in short is if something happens to you that should interrupt your concentration, you need to make a check to see whether or not you maintain concentration on the spell. This is usually done when you take damage, if somebody attacks you, or if you fall off of something, or if you're in some kind of crazy weather condition or something else is happening that makes you for a moment think about something else. You might have to make a concentration check. The way you make a concentration check in this game is you make a Constitution saving throw, which you take a d20, you add your Constitution saving throw modifier from your character sheet, just like the modifiers we've been talking about this whole time, and you compare it against a total that the Dungeon Master will explain. Now, most spells in the game don't have concentration associated with it, but a number of them do. So pay attention to your spell cards and pay attention to the description in the back of the book to see whether or not the spells that you're casting are concentration spells. As an extra detail for concentration spells, you can only concentrate on one concentration spell at a time. You can cast one concentration spell and hold on to it, and then cast a bunch of non-concentration spells. That's okay. So long as you're maintaining concentration on only one concentration spell at a time, you're still playing the game legally. And then the last detail that comes into the card is the description. Now, they do their very best to try and put the full description on here, but sometimes the descriptions for spells are really long, and so it'll direct you going to the player's handbook. But it's still nice to have as a quick cheat sheet to figure out or to remember which spells do what when you're sitting there playing at the table. So those are all the details about casting the spell and what all goes into casting the spell. There's one final detail that I want to cover before the video ends, which is every spell in the game either operates as an attack or it operates as a save-based spell. Now, I know there's a lot to keep track of when it comes to magic, and that's why I tried to do this video to help give you a level of primer on this. And the bottom line is you'll get better at this as you go. So the last detail for a spell is whenever you're casting an offensive spell, it's going to fall into one of two types of execution for actually landing the spell. You're either going to cast it as a magical attack, where just like any other attack, you're going to roll a d20, add your proficiency modifier, and you're going to add your spellcasting modifier against the target's armor class. The Dungeon Master will tell you what that is, but you're either going to be making an attack roll for a spell attack, or you're going to be doing what's called a saving throw, where you're going to make the opponent, you're going to make the target of your spell, make a saving throw. You don't have to do anything when it's a saving throw based spell. Okay, and it'll say in the spell description, make a spell attack, at which point you're going to do the attack roll with your 20-sided die, or it's going to say that the opponent makes a saving throw, and it will specify that they have to make a Constitution saving throw, or they have to make a Dexterity saving throw, or something to that effect. Anytime that someone has to make a saving throw against one of your spells, the difficulty class for that is equal to 8 plus your proficiency modifier plus your spellcasting modifier. Now, what this means is that when the enemy or the target has to make a saving throw, they're trying to make a save against that DC, your DC for your character. So keep that in mind. It's good to know what your attack modifier looks like when you're making a spell attack. And it's good to know what your spell DC is, the save DC, whenever you're trying to make an enemy save against one of your spells. I think that about does it. We've covered a fair bit in terms of getting started with magic. We've covered the kinds of spells that you're able to cast and where you can find that information. We've covered the number of times per day that you're able to cast and where you can find that information. And we've taken a quick look at the specific details of each spell and what that means. What kind of extra details are relevant to each spell for when you want to actually cast that at the table. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that helps you feel a little bit more capable and a little bit more ready to pick up a magic casting character at your gaming table. And the bottom line is, yeah, there's a lot that you have to pick up for magic, and it can be a little bit overwhelming at first, but the details will settle in. It'll start to feel a little more natural as you're playing. And the bottom line is, as you go, you'll have the time. You can ask questions. You can ask questions for your friends. You can ask questions for your dungeon master. You can ask me questions, and I'll be perfectly happy to answer them. Don't worry, you'll pick it up. You'll get there. Just have some fun with it. The next video that I'm going to do is probably going to be talking about character alignment. It's something that I think that new players should be aware of, even if it's got limitations for how it shows up in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. But I think I'm going to do that video next. If you have any suggestions for videos that you'd like me to do, especially as it pertains to new players and just getting started with it, leave me a comment. Let me know. I'd love to find out what kinds of things people are still finding difficult, and I'd love to help explain things. I think that about does it for this video. I'll see you guys next time here at the DMs Club. Until then, have more fun, would ya? It's good for you.